Hello, my lovelies, it's Cupid, and first of all, let me apologize for the lack of makeup on my face right now. I know I kind of look like a mess, but I don't care. I'm rolling with it. I don't feel good, so I'm not gonna wear makeup. Um, so today, the video that I'm gonna do is, in my English class, we've been reading Hamlet, and, after we got done with the play, our teacher started giving us other readings to read that have something to do with Hamlet, and so she gave us this one, and I thought it was really funny, and so I thought I would do a dramatic reading of it. We'll see how this goes. So basically, if you don't know the basic plot line of Hamlet, Hamlet's father has just died, and his uncle Claudius becomes king and marries his Hamlet's mother Gertrude, who was the wife of the king who just died. And so basically, she married her brother-in-law just a month after her husband had died. And that was very normal, but the fact that, she didn't wait 2 years, which is the normal mourning period, that she only waited a month before she married again. And so Hamlet is very upset about not only his father's death, but of his mother's quick marriage, and he calls it incest. And then he has a meeting with a ghost who is the ghost of his father, and his father basically tells him, "Your uncle, my brother, killed me by putting poison in my ear, and now you must avenge my death." And so he goes through this entire journey, just going crazy, insane, trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong, and eventually, killing his uncle. And so while all this is going on, he has there's this another character. His name is Polonius, and he is the father of Hamlet's love, Ophelia, and then Ophelia has a brother, Laertes, and Polonius is he's a fool. He wants to please the king, so he tells the king basically anything to make him happy with him. And then he tells Ophelia to stay away from Hamlet, and Hamlet is trying to push Ophelia away because he doesn't want her to get hurt or get involved in his getting revenge for his father. And so that's the basic details of what you need to know right now. So, and then there's other details you'll find out more while I read this dramatic reading. And this has nothing to do with the thing I'm going to read going on to the video. But I want to tell you guys this because I think it's really funny. So while we were reading Hamlet, we were doing it in class. So my teacher assigned each and every one of us a different part every single day. So there was the guy who was reading the lines of the king. One of his lines was "Sweet Gertrude," which was the queen. And he stumbled on the name Gertrude, and he said something like "Sweet Gertrude" or something like that. And my teacher cut him off and was like, "No, it's Sweet Gertrude." And he said, "Okay," and he restarted the line, "Sweet Gertrude." And then my English teacher went, "The slut," and we all started cracking up laughing. My teacher is a sweet little old lady who doesn't say that stuff, so it was really funny to hear her say it. And then eventually the rest of the class calmed down. But now, because the guy has slut in the back of his mind, when he goes to read the line again, instead of saying "Sweet Gertrude," he says "Sweet slut." And the whole class loses it. For 5 minutes straight, we could not stop laughing. it was so funny. And I know I don't tell the story very well, but it was funny. So just thought I'd throw that in there. And hopefully you guys enjoy the reading that's coming right now. So this is called Shakespeare in the Bush. It was written in 1966 by Laura Bohannon. Sorry. And so it's Shakespeare in the Bush, an American anthropologist, set out to study the Tiv of West Africa and was taught the true meaning of Hamlet. So here I go. Just before I left Oxford for Tiv in West Africa, conversation turned to the season at Stratford. You Americans, said a friend, often have difficulty with Shakespeare. He, after all, a very English poet, and one can easily misinterpret the universal by misunderstanding the particular. I protested that human nature is pretty much the same all over the world. At least the general plot and motivation of the greater tragedies would always be clear everywhere. Although some details of customs might have to be explained and difficulties of translation might produce other slight changes, to end the argument, we cannot conclude. My friend gave me a copy of Hamlet to study in the African bush. It would, he hoped, lift my mind out of its primitive surroundings, and possibly I might be by prolonged meditation, achieve the grace of correct interpretation. People began to drink at dawn. By mid-morning, the whole homestead was singing, dancing, and drumming. When it rained, people had to sit inside their huts. There they drank and sang and drank and told stories. In any case, by noon or before, I either had to join the party or retire to my own hut and my books. One does not discuss serious matters when there is beer. Come drink with us. Since I lacked their capacity for the thick native beer, I spent more and more time with Hamlet. Before the end of the second month, grace descended upon me. I was quite sure Hamlet had only one possible interpretation, and that it was a universally obvious one. Early morning, in the hope of finding some serious talk before the beer party, I used to call on the old man at his reception hut. It's better like this, the old man said, looking at me approvingly and plucking at the thatch that had caught in my hair. You should sit and drink with us more often. Your servants tell me that when you are not with us, you sit inside your hut looking at a paper. The old man was acquainted with 4 kinds of papers: tax receipts, bride price receipts, court fee receipts, and letters. Since my arrivals, letters were brought to me to be read. A few men also brought me bride receipts privately with requests to change the figures to a higher sum. I found moral arguments were no avail, since in-laws were fair game, and the technical hazard of forgery difficult to explain to an illiterate person. I did not wish them to think me silly enough to look at any papers for days on end. I hastily explained that my paper was one of the things of long ago of my country. Ah, said the old man, tell us. I protested that I was not a storyteller. Storytelling is a skilled art among them. Their standards are high, and their audiences are critical. I protested in vain. This morning, they wanted to hear a story while they drank. They threatened to tell me no more stories until I told them one of mine. Finally, the old man promised that no one would criticize my style, for we know you are struggling with our language. But, put in one of the elders, you must explain what we do not understand, as we do when we tell you our stories. Realizing that there is a chance to prove my Hamlet is universally intelligible, I agreed. The old man handed me some more beer to help me on with my storytelling. Men filled their long wooden pipes and knocked coals from the fire to the place in the pipe bowls. Then, puffing contentedly, they sat back and listened. I began in the proper style. Not yesterday, but long ago, a thing occurred. One night, 3 men were keeping watch outside the homestead of the great chief, when suddenly they saw their former chief approach them. Why was he no longer their chief? He was dead, I explained. This is why they were troubled and afraid when they saw him. Impossible, began one of the elders, handing his pipe on to his neighbor, who interrupted. Of course it wasn't the dead chief. It was an omen sent by a witch. Go on. Slightly shaken, I continued. One of these three was a man who knew things, the closest translation for a scholar, but unfortunately it also meant a witch. The second elder looked triumphantly at the first. So he spoke with the dead chief, saying, Tell us what we must do so you may rest in your grave. But the dead chief did not answer. He vanished, and then could see him no more. Then the man who knew things, his name was Horatio, said that this event was the affair of the dead chief's son, Hamlet. There was a general shaking of heads around the circle. Had the dead chief no living brothers, or was the son the chief? No, I replied. That is, he had one living brother who became the chief when the elder brother died. The old man muttered, Such omens were matters for chiefs and elders, not for youngsters. No good could come of going behind a chief's back. Clearly, Horatio was not a man who knew things. Yes, he was, I insisted, shooing a chicken away from my beer. In our country, the son is the next in line to the father. The dead chief's younger brother had become the great chief, so he married his elder brother's widow only about a month after the funeral. He did well. The old man beamed and announced to the others, I told you, if we knew more about Europeans, we would find they really were just like us. In our country also, he added to me, the younger brother marries the elder brother's widow and becomes the father of his children. Now, if your uncle who married your widowed mother is your father's full brother, then he will be a real father to you. Did Hamlet's father and uncle have one mother? His question barely penetrated my mind. I was too upset and thrown too far off balance by having one of the most important elements of Hamlet knocked straight out of the picture. Rather uncertainly, I said I thought they had the same mother, but I wasn't sure. The story didn't say. The old man told me severely that these genealogical details made all the difference, and that when I got home, I must ask my elders about it. He shouted out the door for one of his younger wives to bring his goatskin bag. Determined to save what I could of the mother motive, I took a deep breath and began again. The son Hamlet was very sad because his mother married again so quickly. There was no need for her to do so, and it was our custom for the widow not to go to her next husband until she mourned for 2 years. 2 years is too long, objected the wife that appeared with the old man's battered goatskin bag. Who will hoe your farms for you when you have no husband? Hamlet, I retorted without thinking, was old enough to hoe his mother's farms himself. There was no need for her to remarry. No one looked convinced. I gave up. His mother and the great chief told Hamlet not to be sad, for the great chief himself would be father to Hamlet. Furthermore, Hamlet would be the next chief, therefore he must stay to learn things of the chief. Hamlet agreed to remain, and all the rest went off to drink beer. While I paused, perplexed at how to render Hamlet's disgust soliloquy to an audience, convinced that Claudius and Gertrude had behaved in the best possible manner. One of the younger men asked me who had married the other wives of the dead chief. He had no other wives, I told him. But a chief has many wives. How else could he brew beer and prepare food for all his guests? I said firmly that that in our country, even chiefs had only one wife, and that they had servants to do the work, and that they paid them from tax money. It was better, they returned, for a chief to have many wives and sons who would help him hoe his farms and feed his people. That everyone loved the chief who gave much and took nothing. Taxes were a bad thing. I agreed with the last comment, but for the rest fell back on their favorite way of fobbing off my questions. That is the way it is done, so that's how we do it. I decided to skip the soliloquy. Even if Claudius was here, thought quite right to marry his brother's widow, there remained the poison motive, and even they would not disapprove the fratricide. More hopefully, I resumed. The night Hamlet kept watch with the three who had seen his dead father, the dead chief again appeared. Although the others were afraid, Hamlet followed his dead father off to one side, where they were alone. Hamlet's dead father spoke. "Omens can't talk," said an old man. Hamlet's dead father wasn't an omen. Seeing him might have been an omen, but he was not. My audience looked as confused as I sounded. It was Hamlet's dead father. It was a thing we call a ghost. I had to use the English word, for unlike many of the neighboring tribes, these people didn't believe in the survival after death of any individuating parts of the personality. What is a ghost? An omen? No, a ghost is someone who is dead, but who walks around and can talk, and people can hear them and see them, but not touch them. They objected. One can touch zombies. No, he was not a dead body the witches had animated to sacrifice and eat. No one else made Hamlet's father walk. He did it himself. Dead men can't walk, protested my audience as one man. I was quite willing to compromise. A ghost is the dead man's shadow. But again they objected. Dead men cast no shadows. They do in my country, I snapped. The old men quelled in the babble of disbelief and arose immediately and told me that with an insincere but courteous agreement one extends to fancies of young, ignorant, and superstitious. No doubt in your country the dead can also walk without being zombies. But from the depth of his bag he produced a withered fragment of a cola nut, bit off one end to show it wasn't poison, and handed the rest to me as a peace offering. Anyhow, I resumed, Hamlet's dead father said his own brother was the one who became chief, had poisoned him. He wanted Hamlet to avenge him. Hamlet believed that in his heart, for he did not like his father's brother. I took a swallow of beer. In the country of the great chief, living in the same homestead, for it was a very large one, was an important elder who was often with the chief to advise him. His name was Polonius. Hamlet was courting his daughter, but her father and her brother, I cast hastily about some tribal analogy, warned her not to let Hamlet visit her when she was alone on her farm, for he would be a great chief and so cannot marry her. Why not? Asked the young wife. When it settled down on the edge of the old man's chair, he frowned at her for asking such a stupid question and growled, "They lived in the same homestead." That was not the reason, I informed him. Polonius was a stranger who lived in the homestead because he helped the chief, but not because he was a relative. Then why couldn't Hamlet marry her? He could have, I explained, but Polonius didn't think he would. After all, Hamlet was a man of great importance, who ought to marry a chief's daughter. For in his country, a man could have only one wife. Polonius was afraid that if Hamlet made love to his daughter, then no one else would give a high price for her. That might be true, remarked one of the shrewder elders, but a son's chief would give his mistress's father enough presents and patronage to more than make up the difference. Polonius sounds like a fool to me. Many people think he was, I agreed. Meanwhile, Polonius sent his son Laertes off to Paris to learn of the things of that country, for it was the homestead of a very great chief indeed. Because he was afraid that Laertes might waste a lot of money on beer and women and gambling, or get into trouble by fighting, he sent off one of his servants to Paris secretly to spy out what Laertes was doing. One day, Hamlet came upon Polonius' daughter, Ophelia. He behaved so badly that he frightened her. Indeed, I was fumbling over the words to express the dubious quality of Hamlet's madness. The chief and many others had noticed that when Hamlet talked, one could understand the words, but not what they meant. Many people thought that he had become mad. My audience suddenly became much more attentive. The great chief wanted to know what was wrong with Hamlet, so he sent for 2 of Hamlet's age mates. School friends would have taken way too long to explain. To talk to Hamlet and find out what troubled his heart. Hamlet, seeing that they had been bribed by the chief to betray him, told them nothing. Polonius, however, insisted that Hamlet was mad because he had been forbidden to see Ophelia, whom he loved. Why, inquired a bewildered voice, should anyone bewitch Hamlet and on that account bewitch him? Yes, only a witchcraft can make anyone mad, unless, of course, one sees the beings that lurk in the forest. I stopped being a storyteller and took out my notebook and demanded they tell me more about these creatures, these 2 causes of madness. Even when they spoke, I jotted notes. I tried to calculate the effects of this new factor of the plot. Hamlet had not been exposed to that lurk in the forest. Only his relatives in the male line could bewitch him. Bearing relatives were not mentioned by Shakespeare. It had to be Claudius who was attempting to harm him, and of course, it was. For a moment, I staved off questions by saying that the great chief had also refused to believe that Hamlet was mad for the love of Ophelia and nothing else. He was sure that something much more important was troubling Hamlet's heart. Now Hamlet's age mates, I continued, had brought with them a famous storyteller. Hamlet decided to have this man tell the chief and all of his homestead a story about a man who poisoned his brother because he desired his brother's wife, and he wished to be chief himself. Hamlet was sure the great chief could not hear the story without making any sign that he was indeed guilty, and then he would discover whether his dead father had told him the truth. The old man interrupted with a deep cunning. Why would a father lie to his son? He asked. I hedged. Hamlet was not sure if it really was his dead father. It was impossible to say anything in that language about devil and vision spirits. You mean it actually was an omen, and he knew witches sometimes send false ones. Hamlet was a fool not to go to one skilled in reading omens and dividing the truth in the first place. A man who sees the truth could have told him how his father died, if it really had been poison, and if it was witchcraft in it. And then Hamlet could have called the elders to settle the matter. A shrewd elder ventured to disagree. Because his father's brother was the great chief, one who sees the truth might therefore have been afraid to tell it. I think it was for that reason a friend of Hamlet's father, a witch, and an elder, sent an omen to his friend's sons would know. Was the omen true? Yes, I said, abandoning the ghost and the devil which sent the omen, it would have been true. It was true. For when the storyteller was telling his tale before the homestead, the great chief rose in fear, afraid Hamlet knew his secret and planned to have him killed. The stage set for the next bit presented some difficulties of translation. I began cautiously. The great chief told Hamlet's mother to find out from her son what he knew. Because a woman's children are always first in her heart, he had an important elder, Polonius, hide behind a cloth that hung against the wall of Hamlet's mother's sleeping hut. Hamlet started to scold his mother for what she had done. There was a shocked murmur for everyone. A man should never scold his mother. She called out in fear, and Polonius moved behind the cloth, shouting, "A rat!" Hamilton took his machete and slashed through the cloth. I paused for dramatic effect. He had killed Polonius. The old men looked at each other in supreme disgust. That Polonius was truly a fool, and a man who knew nothing. What child does not know to shout, "It's me"? With a pang, I remembered that these people are ardent hunters, always armed with bow and arrow and machete. The first At the first rustle in the grass, and an arrow is aimed and ready, and the hunter shouts, "Game!" If no human voice answers immediately, the arrow speeds on its way. Like a good hunter, Hamlet has shouted, "A rat." I rushed in to save Polonius' reputation. Polonius did not speak. Hamilton heard him, but he thought it was the chief and wished to kill him to avenge his father. This time, I shocked my audience seriously. For a man to raise his hand against his father's brother, and one who became his father, is a terrible thing. The elders ought to let such a man be bewitched. I nibbled at my colon in some perplexity and pointed out that, after all, the man had killed Hamlet's father. "No," pronounced an old man, speaking less to me than to the young man sitting behind the elders. "If your father's brother has killed your father, you must appeal to your father's age mates. They may avenge him. No man can use violence against his senior relatives." Another thought struck him. But if his father's brother had indeed been wicked enough to bewitch Hamlet and make him mad, that it would be a good story indeed, for it would be his fault that Hamlet, being so mad, no longer had any sense and thus was ready to kill his father's brother. There was a murmur of applause. Hamlet was a good story to them again. But it no longer seemed quite the same story to me, as I thought over the coming complications of plot and motive. I lost courage and decided to skim over the ground quickly. The great chief, I went on, was not sorry that Hamlet killed Polonius. It gave him a reason to send Hamlet away with his 2 treacherous age mates, with a letter to the chief of a far country saying that Hamlet should be killed. But Hamlet changed the writings in the paper so that the chief killed the age mates instead. I encountered a reproachful glare from one of the men who I had told undetectable forgery was not merely immoral but beyond human skill. I looked the other way. Before Hamlet could return, Laertes came back to his father's funeral. The great chief told him Hamlet had killed Polonius. Laertes swore to kill Hamlet because of this, and because his sister, Ophelia, hearing her father had been killed by the man she loved, went mad and drowned herself in the river. "Have you forgotten what we told you?" The old man was reproachful. "One cannot take vengeance on a madman. Hamlet killed Polonius in his madness. As for the girl, she not only went mad, she was drowned. Only witches can make people drown. Water itself cannot hurt anything. It is merely something one drinks and bathes in." I began to get cross. "If you don't like the story, I'll stop." The old man made soothing noises and himself poured me some more beer. "You tell the story well, and we are listening. But it's clear that the elders of your country have not told you what the story really means. No, do not interrupt. We believe when you are saying your marriage customs are different, or your clothes and weapons, but people are the same everywhere, and there are always witches, and it is we, the elders, who know how witches work. We told you it was the great chief who wished to kill Hamlet, and now in your own words you have proved us right. Who were Ophelia's male relatives? There was only her father and her brother. Hamlet was clearly out of my hands. There must have been many more. This also you must ask your elders when you get back to your country. From what you tell us, Polonius was dead. It must have been Laertes who killed Ophelia, although I do not see reason for it. We had emptied 1 pot of beer, and the old man argued at this point with slightly tipsy interest. Finally, one of them demanded of me, "What did the servant of Polonius say on his return?" I with difficulty recollected Rinaldo and his mission. I don't think he did return before Polonius was killed. "Listen," said the elder, "and I wish to tell you how it was and how your story will go, and then you may tell me if I'm right. Polonius knew his son would get into trouble, and so he did. He had many fines to pay for fighting and debts for gambling. But he had only 2 ways of getting money quickly. One was to marry off his sister at once, which would be difficult to find a man who will marry a woman desired by the son of a chief. For if the chief's heir commits adultery with your wife, what can you do? Only a fool calls a case against a man who will someday be his judge. Therefore, Laertes had to take the second way. He killed his sister by witchcraft, drowning her so he could secretly sell her body to witches. I raised an objection. They found her body and buried it. Indeed, Laertes jumped into the grave to see his sister once more. So you see, the body was truly there. Hamlet, who had just come back, jumped in after him. What did I tell you? The elder appealed to the others. Laertes was up to no good with his sister's body. Hamlet prevented him, because of the chief's heir, like a chief, does not wish any other man to grow rich and powerful. Laertes was angry because he would have killed his sister without benefit for himself. In our country, he would try to kill Hamlet for that reason. Is that not what happened? More or less, I admitted. When the great chief found Hamlet was still alive, he encouraged Laertes to try to kill Hamlet and arrange a fight with matches between them. In the fight, both of the young men were wounded to death. Hamlet's mother drank a poisoned beer, which the chief meant for Hamlet in case he did not win the fight. And when he saw his mother die of poison, Hamlet, dying, managed to kill his father's brother with his machete. You see, I was right, exclaimed the elder. That was a very good story, added one old man, and he told it with few mistakes. There was just one error at the very end. The poison Hamlet's mother drank was obviously meant for the survivor of the fight, whichever it was. If Laertes had won, the great chief would have poisoned him, for no one would know he arranged Hamlet's death. Then, too, he needed to fear Laertes' witchcraft. It takes a strong heart to kill one's only sister by witchcraft. Sometime, concluded the old man, with gathering his ragged toga around him, you must tell us some more stories of your country. We, who are elders, will instruct you on their true meaning, so that when you return to your own land, to your elders, you will see that you have not been sitting around in the bush, but among those who know things and who have taught you wisdom. Alright, guys, I hope you liked that story. I read it because I had nothing else planned, and I thought it was really funny, and I enjoyed it, so I hope you did too. If you did, please give this video a big thumbs up. Any comments? Please put it down in the comment section below, and subscribe to our channel, and turn on those post notifications so you can get alerted every single time we post. Alright, guys, I'll see you not next week, but the week after that. Alright, guys. Bye. Love ya. This is Cupid. Signing off. I almost forgot.